some of the brain is wired, but much of the brain development actually happens in that first year of life, right? The brain is starting to make new connections. It's coming together. It's building neuronal pathways. And this is all happening in the first year, right? This is an incredible time for growth of the brain for babies. And what do they need? I get a lot of parents coming to me being like, what do I need to help my baby grow, to support their development, to stimulate them? And my answer is always, they need you. You are enough. You don't need anything fancy. You need yourself and your love. Because when you're holding a newborn baby, right, the baby's feeling your heartbeat, your breathing, that is shaping their brain, right? That is giving them a sense of security. That is giving them a connection to you. And it's crazy. That is also shaping how they're going to respond to the world, because safe, stable, nurturing relationships are really bolster brain growth, especially in that first year.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about newborn care and parenting. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Joanna Parga-Belinkie. Dr. Joanna is an associate professor of pediatrics and clinical neonatologist. She is also a spokesperson for the American Academy of Pediatrics and co-host of the podcast Pediatrics On Call. You can reach Dr. Joanna at her website, jpbelinkiemd.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Joanna. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to be able to have this conversation because it's something that really matters, and I love talking about things that matter. I enjoy checking out your website, and there was this beautiful image of a mom holding this newborn baby, and you could just feel the love and the connection that was going on. And as we talk today, I'm hoping that you'll be able to kind of help explain to us the importance and some of the science behind that newborn attachment and how it affects not only that beautiful moment that we see captured in a photograph, but also our long-term development.
And I'm so glad you liked that photo, because it's actually a picture of me and my first baby. So aside from being a doctor, I'm also a mom of three. I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and recently 1-year-old. And so I've been with a lot of babies, and my hope is to make people enjoy the newborn period. Because there are certainly people who find it very challenging and do not enjoy it and kind of want to rush through it. But I'm hoping that I can help people embrace it.
I love that. And I think this is a place where we can add an and. I think newborns are hard. It is an adjustment. And especially if you're a first-time mom, the huge adjustment changes. But that doesn't mean that it has to be miserable. We can have a challenging thing and enjoy each moment, or well, not every single moment, but we can have more positives than we have frustrations, I could say.
And I think in part that's how you kind of go into that newborn period, right? I think a lot of people hear that it's hard, and I think it is can be a challenging part of parenting, because a newborn is so demanding. They require 24/7 care. Their sleep-wake cycles are non-existent, right? So they're not resting when we are, or needing the same stimulation that we do, or the same timing of feeds, right? So there's just a lot of different, and especially for new parents, this is going to be an upheaval in their lives. This is introducing a stranger into their home and then working to try to get to know them. And I would argue that babies do have a temperament and a personality that kind of sticks with them, that you see as they grow, throughout their infanthood and their childhood. And so it's getting to know that person that I think is a good focus for new parents, right? Because while the newborn period is short, the relationship you want to build with that person is long, and something that you want to be loving and sustaining, right? So I think we have to shift focus away from the newborn period when we're in it and feeling overwhelmed by it, towards let me see if I can look to the future and see what relationship I want to build with this baby.
Wow. And that's interesting. And you brought up some important things. Sometimes people think, newborns come and they're sort of a blank canvas, and you get to mold and shape them. And that's sort of true and sort of not true, because they come the way that they come, and then you work with that. So I love that idea of let's get to know you. Let's know who you are and what matters to you. And then we're going to focus long term on, oh, I'm building a relationship starting right now. And this relationship is for life. So let's build a good one.
Yeah, and new parents should know that they are paramount to this child's development, right? Like you said, some of the brain is wired, but much of the brain development actually happens in that first year of life, right? The brain is starting to make new connections, it's coming together, it's building neuronal pathways, and this is all happening in the first year, right? This is an incredible time for growth of the brain for babies. And what do they need? I get a lot of parents coming to me being like, what do I need to help my baby grow, to support their development, to stimulate them? And my answer is always, they need you. You are enough. You don't need anything fancy. You need yourself and your love. Because when you're holding a newborn baby, right? And you mentioned that picture on my website where I'm holding a baby against my chest. The baby's feeling your heartbeat, your breathing. That is shaping their brain, right? That is giving them a sense of security. That is giving them a connection to you. And it's crazy. That is also shaping how they're going to respond to the world, because safe, stable, nurturing relationships are really bolster brain growth, especially in that first year.
Wow. That safe, stable relationship bolsters brain growth. So, is that some of the research and the statistics that we're seeing? So, it's not just an emotional attachment, this is also a physiological development. And as you explain that, my favorite line was, "You are enough." Because, man, we don't usually feel like we're enough. But to know that what the baby needs is us is both comforting and a little bit scary, because we know our weaknesses.
It gets to weakness being something that is also a strength, right? We're human beings. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes in how we parent. We're going to make mistakes in how we do our job. We're going to make mistakes in all sorts of, and that being able to make a mistake and learn from it and grow from it is, I think, a core tenet of parenting, right? And you don't want to be a perfect parent, because nothing's perfect. We say progress, not perfection, right? So, and I think that's fun because that's in a lot of like kid shows now that are really good on PBS and stuff, right? It's not about being the perfect parent. There's no perfect parent, right? Every human is complicated, is a set of emotions, is a set of experiences, and that's what your baby's going to learn. But having you as sort of that stable, nurturing caregiver, and we're social creatures, right? So it's safe, stable, nurturing relationships that help grow a baby. It's your relationship with baby. It's other people that you love and trust and their relationship with baby. And a parent is a caregiver. And caregivers need other caregivers. They need other support, right? So we're talking about safe, stable, nurturing relationships for baby and their growth, which is so important for setting out how their brain is going to be and how they're going to respond to the world. But even adults need that, right? And especially adults who are parenting a newborn. They need a support network that's going to be a safety net for them, that's going to help them model the types of relationships that they want to have with their baby, And so that's why I always tell parents to kind of not focus on what you need to buy or what you need to do. And I did some air quotes with do, But who do you want this person to become? And what qualities are you trying to demonstrate for this person? And thinking about those things, I think, is what's really important before you have a baby. And this took me a while to learn in my parenting journey, right? So it wasn't until my third baby that I made a vision board, because I was trying to kind of look at the things that were important for me to pass on, that I wanted to teach my baby, things like empathy, forgiveness, loving, some good qualities, navigating problems, right? Because we talked about how we are not infallible. And our babies aren't going to be either, right? And so kind of modeling those things. And I made my vision board kind of into 4 different sections, from a Harvard Business article on success, actually. So I looked at achievement, happiness, legacy, and significance, and kind of use those as a model to think about the type of parent I want to be and hopefully be a successful parent to my baby.
Wow, that is both amazing, comforting, and overwhelming. Because when we talk about, okay, you are enough. I'm going to go back to that. You are enough. And so, what does that mean? Does you are enough mean that I have to be perfect? Fortunately, the answer is no. In fact, one of the lessons that we want to be able to help our children understand is how to learn and grow from mistakes. And we do that by modeling. Ta-da! That means I am making mistakes and I am learning and growing from my mistakes. And as I do that, I am also teaching my child, wow, it's okay to make a mistake and it is okay to learn and grow from those mistakes. And I loved how you talked about you're thinking long term. What do I want my child to be? And you're talking in terms of qualities. I want my child to be empathetic. I want my child to be loving. I want my child maybe to be confident or creative or something, these kinds of things. It's not, my child is going to be a doctor because I need that, I need that boost of self-esteem, or a lawyer, or whatever our personal thing is. It's not that. It's not deciding their life. It's giving them the building blocks. All of that is awesome. Then when you bring in that fancy article and put in all these big words, then I think, oh, maybe we need an upgrade. So do you want to talk about that at all? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think that was how I modeled thinking about all of these big things for my baby, but I think you could do it in any number of ways, right? And I think, again, the important thing is not to get lost in sort of the very overwhelming time of the newborn period, and think about, because the other thing you're doing in this period, right? Of course, there are qualities you want to pass on to your kids and other things, but and attributes maybe, and you want to help them be more creative and things like you were saying. But the other thing that you want to do, is support the type of person that's in front of you, right? And figure out a way to communicate with your baby. And that's not easy, because the primary way that we communicate with our children is by talking to them as they get older, that we're humans. So we're using, verbal cues to kind of talk with each other and figure out what each other needs or wants in a relationship, right? But a baby can't talk. They could cry, and that could be really stressful, right? Hearing that cry. For all of my babies, I always had a very visceral reaction to their cries. But that's one way that they're communicating, right? So you're listening to their cries, and there's some really interesting science in the pitch of the cry, and parents actually being able to determine, what each cry means based on that. Like, is it, a comfort temperature issue versus a dirty diaper versus an I'm hungry cry, so parents will actually be able to pick that out. But the way parents are able to pick that out is by sort of actively listening to baby and watching them and responding to them, right? This gets to this safe, stable, nurturing part of parenting, right? And we're going to have to make some assumptions about what they need or want, but they're going to be giving us feedback when we do actions for them. And so that's how we start communicating. It's this sort of serve and return, right? Like, an action occurs and then we respond to that action. And then we go back and forth with our baby. It's like a tennis match, right? Until someone gets the game point, someone figures it out, right? And you have to do that trial and error with a baby to start to understand them and communicate with them, right? So you can't shape their temperament or their personality maybe, but you can expose them to things that are important to you. And you can also learn how to pick up on their cues and communicate with them and support them in the best way for things that they need.
wow. And, going back, it's been a while since my little ones were little, but that there aren't words. We don't have words to communicate. We start with all they can do is cry. All they can say is, I don't like this. I'm not comfortable. And then from there, then you go through, oh, is it this? Is it this? Let's check through the needs. Let's go through all of the things. And I loved how you said that people are able to pick up on, and I was trying to think, did I know the difference between a dirty diaper cry and an I'm hungry cry? I'm not sure that I could remember or pick that out exactly, but you certainly can tell the difference between I'm hurting, there's an emergency cry versus I'm upset cry. I mean, that one, I think every parent is tuned into that one where it's like, oh, this cry means run, versus this cry means, I want something. So yeah. Well, let's talk about some specifics. So we're trying to build this, and sleep is an issue. So, do you want to talk about sleep? Do you do sleep training? Or how do you feel about like the baby sleeping with mom? Are there any thoughts on that?
This is such a hot topic for parents, right? Because sleep deprivation is really real with a newborn baby. And I like to be real. I think it's something you can't avoid. You're going to be tired when you have a newborn baby, right? And we live in the United States. We're a consumer society, right? And I believe in the best of people, right? So I think if you look at the consumer market, right, for baby products, sleep products are at the top of the list, and there's a reason for that, right? Because you will, as a new parent, and for new parents listening, you will experience sleep deprivation. And I'm a doctor. I've done 24, 30-hour calls in the hospital, and so I thought I was ready for a baby because I was like, well, I've pulled all-nighters, I've done this and that, in my training. It's the chronic sleep deprivation that really gets you. It hits differently, especially when you're the birthing parent and you've just had a baby and your body's changing too, so it's hard. It's really a tough thing. So, and the reason for this, right, getting to some science, is that babies just don't sleep like we do. I think we touched on this earlier. A baby sleeps in fits and spurts. That's the best way to describe it, right? They'll sleep for 20 minutes, they'll wake up. They'll sleep for 90 minutes, they'll wake. There's no predicting that. And we have a circadian rhythm, right? We have a day-night cycle, and we want to sleep through the night. And if you read papers about baby sleep, we kind of all debate what sleep through the night means. Is it 6 hours? Is it 8 hours? Here's the thing, you're not going to get it with a baby. They need to eat every few hours too. And so it's just different. So I say control what you can, and be prepared for sleep deprivation. And how can you do that? I think this gets back to having a support network and relationships that you can count on, loving, nurturing relationships that you want to model for baby, right? So getting any support you can from friends, family, if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford support to pay for, you can also think about that. There's different ways that you could get support. And it could be daytime support or nighttime support. I think the old adage, like sleep when the baby sleeps, is unrealistic, right? Because again, we have sleep-wake cycles. And so that's hard to do. You're not going to sleep for 20 minutes, wake up, and then want to sleep for 90 minutes. That's just not realistic. But I don't know that adults embrace daytime naps as much as they can. So certainly embracing napping more. And giving yourself permission to kind of leave your busy life and not overschedule yourself when you have a newborn. You might think like, at the end of a pregnancy, if you get to term, right, is really tough. It's tough on the body. You've maybe already had your sleep affected, and then you're like, okay, well, birth is going to be like such a relief. And then it's just different, I think it's like different challenges after birth, right? So I think you just have to give yourself grace and space to spend time with your baby and also work on your sleep hygiene, right? So we talked about getting support. We talked about daytime naps if you could do it, and seeing if you could make that a part of your schedule. And then it's also, and I say this really early on with babies, starting a bedtime routine with them, one that you both can enjoy and interact with. And when my babies were really little and picture books, they like probably couldn't even really see, I would read my own books to them. And, so I mean, I don't want to admit romantasy books I got really into with my baby when they were really little. That became a part of our bedtime routine. Doing herbal teas became a part of my bedtime routine. So kind of working on that sleep hygiene. And, sleep training, I think, is a personal thing, right? I think there are just some babies that are not going to be really amenable to sleep training. I mean, we could probably do a whole podcast on sleep training, right? And there's some babies that just aren't really going to be programmed to sleep through the night in the first year, and so those might be the more challenging babies to sleep train. So I always say, talk to your pediatrician about sleep training and see what works for your family, right? Because I think sleep training is not a necessity, but it might be something that you feel like you need, and so I think that that's more a personal choice. But I think we have to understand that especially in those first 6 months, it's hard to get baby on any sleep schedule.
I love that. I love that you said, okay, I like to get real about things. And as you described, you can hear not only the wisdom and training of a doctor, but the wisdom and training of a mom who has been there, done that. And the answer is, you know, we're going to have to play some adapt. We're going to have to play adapt because we're working with a newborn who does not have the circadian rhythm in place of we're awake in the day, we sleep at night. And in addition to what any child would have, we're going to have that individual child and what his or her needs are. And it's okay to play adapt and to work with this is what I have, and let's work with this. I appreciate that. It feels realistic, and it also feels like we have permission, like it's okay that my baby doesn't sleep through the night. It's okay that we're playing adapt. That doesn't mean I failed. That means I'm a parent and we are winging it. We are working through this. And some of the things that you mentioned and brought up were just one, let's get our expectations so that they're realistic enough that we're not frustrated and disappointed all the time. Tired, yes, but we don't also need to be frustrated and disappointed. This is going to be a challenge as a child learns a schedule. And there are some things that you can do. You talked about following the parent's own sleep hygiene in addition to helping the child have some let's get a routine going so that you can understand that this is the time to sleep and this is the time to be awake. And I think that change, I mean, we all figure it out eventually, so it works. And isn't it wonderful that there's more than one right way to do things? So thank heavens for that. Yeah. And you're right. New parents, you're going to be tired, but it's okay. And it's not forever.
Yeah, I think it's just a part of what makes the newborn period often very challenging. And I think what makes some parents not really like it, you know? But again, I say it's really a short period, you know, that as you when you're in it doesn't feel that way.
Oh,
But when you are through it and your child is getting older because they never get younger again, right? They're just marching forward in time. You're like, oh, that was like a very short period, right? And again, and what I always say too is, you know, how your baby reacts and maybe how they're wired, especially really early on, is probably them and not necessarily how you're parenting, right? So you do have to give yourself grace as a parent, again, to kind of get to know your baby. And I think it's easy when you have a crying baby to think like you've done something wrong and it's all on you, you know? But really that's that baby's way of communicating too, right? Crying is one of the only ways that they know how to do that. So you're still learning each other. And so you have to give yourself time to learn each other.
no, isn't that grace? I love it. Grace. Let's give ourselves some patience and it's okay. It's okay. We don't need to panic. We just need to keep going. And since that's what most of us are doing reflexively, it's nice to have that reassurance that good job. What you're doing is just fine. You're doing fine. You know, as we talked at the very beginning about some of the physiological uh, benefits for the child of having that attachment, I think also the attachment it goes both ways in that even though it's a hard time, but because I love my children so much, there's it's okay to do this sacrifice because I love them. So it's a win-win when we make that attachment. Now, there are some circumstances or things that can come up that can kind of interfere with that attachment. Do you want to talk about some of those potential roadblocks and how we can maybe navigate those?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned love. That's like such a powerful emotion. There are parents that have babies and it is not love at first sight for them, right? They struggle with perinatal mood disorders, or, you know, we could say the postpartum blues. There's anxiety, there's depression that can set in, you know, and I always, that's why I focus on the long game, right? if it's not love at first sight is something you see in the movies. And again, we're talking about real life, right? So there are some parents that are going to have a baby. They're going to be like immediate love, right? They're going to feel those feelings, right? And there's some parents that aren't just going to have that connection right away. But think of many of the relationships in your life take time to build, right? And take time to become strong. And it takes time for that love to blossom. So I just want new parents to know that that's okay. This is having a relationship is sort of something that you need to work on throughout your whole life, right? So maybe you have to start that work early on, and be reflexive and find your support, and let that love grow, and that's fine. That's every experience is different. And there are certainly things that can disrupt being able to be with your baby right away after delivery, right? Maybe you didn't have the delivery that you anticipated, right? Or maybe you knew it was going to be a difficult delivery. And also you knew maybe there was a medical issue with the baby that landed them in my care as a neonatologist or baby doctor in the NICU, right? And so you're not going to be able to be with your baby right after birth. And I think that can be really challenging for a lot of families and raise a lot of questions about how they're going to bond and how they're going to connect, right? And I think, on top of that too, feeding can be something that can stress parents out, feeding a baby, because that's one of the primary jobs we have as parents for a newborn, and how they're going to do it. And maybe breastfeeding didn't go the way they want, and that could also affect how you're bonding. But I think the key here is to realize that again, it's a long game, right? And that what you're trying to do is build a safe, stable, nurturing relationship. So I think you have to put time into being able to do that. And we can kind of break that term down into each of its parts, right? Safety, there's physical safety for baby. So if they're a baby that has medical complexity and needs to be in the NICU, that's a place they need to be for their safety, right? So as a parent, when you have, when you're coming into the NICU and you're probably sad that they're there, because that's the main emotion, right? Or frustrated or angry or what have you about the baby being sick. They're in a safe place, right? That's where they need to be at that time. So, and then there's psychological safety too. And that takes time to build, but it's essentially letting your baby know that they can trust you. So in the time that you get to be in the NICU or the time that you're hanging out with baby at home, right? Say they're not a baby with medical complexity, making sure that you're a person they can trust. You're going to be there to comfort them. You're going to respond to their emotions, and they can rely on you to do that. And then, that stability comes with consistency, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to be there 24/7 and always be the person that's on. Because remember earlier, we talked about how you need a support network, right? It's just consistency in caregivers, so the baby begins to recognize who their primary caregivers are, right? And then nurturing, and here's that trial and error part, right? Nurturing doesn't mean getting everything right. Nurturing means trying, right? It means developing love. It means wanting to have that relationship, right? And so I think when you focus on those things and do what you can do, I think mom guilt is real, parent guilt is real, but I think you can bring it back to, okay, but if I establish the safe, stable, nurturing relationship with my baby, that's what's going to be the long-term goal. And that's what I want to sustain with them through their lives.
Wow. Thank you so much for going through that. And because you are on the other side and you can see the parents' anguish and their frustration and their sadness and maybe even guilt as they're not able to have this beautiful experience that they hoped for, you would really understand what that is like. And I appreciate that you talked about this is a long game and the guilt that we can have. I was fortunate with my children that I did feel that bond and that connection right away. But I do have friends who struggled with that. They used to call it baby blues. I don't know what the current term is, where you struggle
Still that,
with
yeah.
depression, you struggle with different things. And I've talked to moms who struggle with anxiety. And my grandson ended up in the NICU and started life with lots of challenges. And so I've seen not necessarily firsthand, but secondhand through the experiences, a whole spectrum of possibilities. And it is sad when we add guilt to an already challenging situation. And you have just given us permission to brush off the guilt and say it's okay. If you don't have that instant connection, it doesn't mean you're a bad parent. It doesn't mean that you failed. It's just right here, right now. This is what is. We're going to be real. But we have a desire, and we have a long-term relationship, and there's time to make the adjustments and to change even our feelings. And I love that you said it's really, let's start with a desire, a want. I want this. And I want my child to know that he or she can trust me, that I am a consistent part of their life, and it's going to be okay. So thank you for the comfort and the reality that you brought into. Guys, this is challenging. And if you are a parent of a newborn, or you have been, go ahead and pat yourself on the back. If you're able to get this child to stay alive, which is a challenge in and of itself, and then to be able to make those connections. And remember the long game. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
No, I think you covered it, Linda. I think it's give yourself permission to leave your busy life and just get to know your baby, and know that how you interact with your baby is going to shape the person that they become. So this is valuable time for you to take.
It is. It is valuable. And once again, permission. It's okay to not do everything. And it is definitely okay to not do everything at the same time. It's okay to say, okay, this other demand on my time can pause, because this time with my newborn is short and it never comes back. It is here, it is now, and I can let go of the guilt and just embrace this moment. So thank you so much, Joanna. This has been delightful.
Thank you so much for having me.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Ivana Davies. She said, "Although the bond between a mother and her child is invisible, it's stronger than any man-made material in existence." Today, I invite parents to strengthen their bonds with their children. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.